So thanks everyone for joining. Welcome back to our Teamwork Symposia. This is an ongoing series where we're trying to learn secret skills of teamwork from non-academics. We have an exception today. We have a number of actually academic experts coming from Mason Gross School of Arts. And leading the pack is Dr. Rebecca Cypess, the Associate Dean of the school, and I think I'm going to pass the mic over to her to introduce our cast of speakers and really their range of creative skills and to talk about what teamwork means in their individual disciplines. So thanks all for joining, and Rebecca, please do take it away.
So I want to thank you, Biju, Nancy, Ralph, for suggesting that this team from the Mason Gross School of the Arts come to speak about secrets of successful team building, and this is the view from the arts. So I'm Rebecca Cypess. I'm the Associate Dean for Academic Affairs at Mason Gross. I'm very happy to be here. My background is as a musicologist and historical keyboardist, but I have a great love for interdisciplinary collaboration and collaborative research. So I'm very excited to be joined today by my colleagues representing each of the 5 departments at Mason Gross. Christopher Cartmill, who's an associate professor and interim associate chair, as well as head of dramaturgy in the theater department. Jonathan Spitz, associate professor and a cellist in the Department of Music. Patrick Stettner, associate professor and chair of the Rutgers Filmmaking Center. Jacqueline Thaw, associate professor and head of design in the Department of Art and Design. And Alessandra Williams, assistant professor in the Department of Dance. So I just thought that I would give a little bit of an overview about what's going on here at Mason Gross and how we're seeing collaboration, team research, and also perhaps how Mason Gross might be of use in this setting and perhaps even in other settings to folks in science, science research, and medicine. So first of all, just to take stock at Mason Gross, we are in a kind of stock-taking phase. We had a new dean who arrived, Dean Jason Geary, in July 2020. I came on as Associate Dean for Academic Affairs in January 2021, and we're right now in the process of mapping out a path for our curricula and also for research and creative practice at the school, thinking about, I have here, what is a conservatory actually about? But really the question is, what is a conservatory in a large research university? So we're thinking about things like, to what extent are we gatekeepers for the arts? And to what extent are we about increasing access? To what extent do we want to think about the arts as intrinsically valuable, which I think is a concept that we're all very much committed to, and also thinking about the arts as an intervention in other fields, facilitating communication, expression, emotion, connection, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? The arts can facilitate all of these aspects in other fields. And I think that this is something that we're particularly interested in exploring. So how can we as a team, and again, these are representatives, some eminent representatives of our departments at Mason Gross, how can we be helpful to non-arts disciplines such as medicine or team science? One is that we are looking for collaboration with non-arts disciplines, and we are increasing our activities in that area. I'll give you a couple of examples that are particularly exciting in a moment. And also just thinking about the arts as a model of collaboration, right? There's some amount in the arts of kind of individual creative work, and that mirrors the model of the sort of individual scholar sitting in their study, just thinking about things or sitting alone in a lab. But actually, much more of the arts is about teamwork. Much more of it is about ensemble work, collaboration, right? What does it take to put on a play? Right? What does it take to create a film? These are things that cannot be done by one person. And they rely on the successful coordination of experts in a really wide range of subfields. So one thing that we did recently, which I think is a really exciting mode for sparking collaborative research, is that we undertook speed networking. This is something that we piloted with the School of Public Health in May 21, and that we also just did again with the School of Environmental and Biological Sciences. So we got a whole bunch of scholars and artists from both schools into a Zoom room. Actually, we use the Wonder platform for this, which is sort of like Zoom. And we asked people to just talk to each other for 7 minutes at a time about their work, what makes them tick, what excites them as scholars and artists. And we came away with some really interesting collaborative research projects, including one study of the effects of implementing Polestar Pilates on racially and socioeconomically diverse public high schools in New Jersey. Another that addresses HIV-related stigma through photo voice, and that features Jacky Thaw, whom you'll hear from in a few moments. And another HIV-related project, HIV, AIDS, and survivorship, developing positive health outcomes and resilience through an embodied oral history workshop and performance. So again, bringing the arts to bear on public health issues. We know that the arts are key to public health in terms of everything from mental health and well-being to physical health. So again, those are things that could not be possible without collaboration. I also just want to mention quickly the Integrated Dance Collaboratory, which is, it's about community engaged programming around disability. Right, so integrated dance is the incorporation of individuals with disabilities into the art of dance. The Integrated Dance Collaboratory also serves as a hub for science research about dance as an intervention for public health and wellness, building on the success of the Dance Parkinson's program. So bringing people living with Parkinson's into the dance studio for movement classes, which also translates into community building and a sense of kind of connection with other people going through the same experiences. I also just want to highlight briefly the Documentary Film Lab, which Patrick might be able to talk a little bit about later. It's an award-winning grant-funded lab that creates documentaries, including documentaries about science and healthcare. So right now they're embarking on a documentary on healthcare in the local Oaxacan community. And also they're on the large coastal erosion grant from the NSF that's being led by a faculty member at CEDS, Robert Kopp. It also involves training for student artists who collaborate on creating these documentaries. And finally, this is of course a really effective means for science communication. So I'm just putting these things on the radar of folks who might be watching this this discussion as a way of saying, yes, the arts are intrinsically valuable, and that's ground that I will never yield, right? I will always say that the arts have intrinsic value. They're part of what makes us human. But I also think that the arts can supercharge fields outside of our own disciplines, including science, and the arts can serve a lot of different roles. So that's just a sort of overview of where we are in terms of thinking about collaboration at Mason Gross. I'm going to stop talking now. And I'm going to go over to the 5 questions that we were offered. So the way that we're going to handle this is I'll present each of the 5 questions. We have one panelist who will take the lead on answering that one question. That person will speak for about 5 minutes, and then we'll go to a kind of discussion among the other 4 panelists. So that will also take about 5 minutes total, and then we'll move on to the next question. So Patrick Stettner of the Filmmaking Lab is going to start, and the question was, academia has long rewarded individual accomplishment over team success. In your industry or sector, how do you incentivize team members to work for the good of the team and not just their individual success? So Patrick, please.
Thank you, Rebecca. We can start on my first slide, yes. So I'm going to let's go back one slide. I'm going to start about the collaboration, first of all, about filmmaking, because it is fundamental to filmmaking. Filmmaking is structured in very specific ways that facilitate very complex creative endeavors that involve a lot of people, a lot of equipment, a lot of trucks, and going to a lot of different locations. I'm frankly envious of other art forms that don't require these, especially the money part. But next slide, please. For my personal experience as a director, I've worked with crew and cast of up to 60 people a day. It's a high pressurized environment with lots of different moving parts. We're constantly moving to locations, and as a director, you feel like you never have enough time. But I thought it would be interesting first, before I answer those questions, to take a look at the organizational charts to give you a context how a filmmaking unit is structured. Next slide, please. Yeah. So first of all, this is the producer's team. This gives you an idea of the people who are the backbone of the shoot. They are responsible for the complicated logistics of supporting the creative team. I just want to take careful note of the assistant director here, because that's also bridges between the creative team. The next slide, please. This is part of the director's team. It's extensive. I had to put it in two different parts. As director, you're constantly dealing with these team leaders from different departments, the director of photography, the production designer, and all of those people have a team behind them. So communication is streamlined in a very efficient way. Next slide, please. And then part two of the director's team, you'll again notice the assistant director here, who has a dual role of supporting the director, but also working as a bridge to the producer's team and that infrastructure. It's very helpful in terms of how the shoots are managed to function with, again, 60 people on set trying to figure out how to communicate and how to do very complex things. I find the structure of shoots to be very efficient. And then finally, the last slide, please. This is the post-production team that the director deals with after the shooting is finished. Next slide, please. So for me, I broke this question down into 4 strategies. How do we incentivize team members for individual success, and how do you strike the right balance? For me, I think short-term goals are very key. I think film has some intelligent organizational ways that it functions. I think every morning there is something called a call sheet that all crew members receive the night before. And it outlines in a very clear way what's happening tomorrow. It has the locations, the call times, where to park, when's lunch, what time is wrap. But most importantly, it has specific short-term goals by giving everybody on the crew from top to bottom what are the pages from the screenplays that will be accomplished the next day. And I think that this is a very effective way for everyone being on the same page to kind of reinforce this collective. And it reinforces, again, this notion of a joint endeavor. And I think it's important that people get it the night before, so they're not waking up, so they're waking up knowing what they're going to do. Second of all, an agency, because you're communicating with a lot of different people. I believe as a creative person that you kind of have to have agency, or give your collaborators agency in those relationships. So the way I work is I kind of outline a vision, usually what is the artistic, the humanistic, what are we trying to do with this film? And then from there, I give each department head a certain agency, and I ask them to surprise me. I ask them to be creative within, so to speak, the sandbox provided, so that you're able to kind of constantly regenerate the piece. So, you know, a director who is just faithfully reproducing what is on the screenplay is not really a director. It's really taking it to the next level. The third thing is valuing collaborative creativity. I make sure in a very public way to value the process of collaborative creativity. I think it reinforces the idea of community and gives rise to this notion of cooperation, achieving a greater whole. And then finally, I think, you know, within film, I think there is appreciation of art and beauty. I make sure to appreciate, again, in a public way, that we are creating certain artistic beauty. And it can be a moment of reveling in performance, what the camera's doing, what the lighting's doing, what the set is, what piece of furniture is, a wardrobe, whatever it might be. I believe that notion that creative people believe in some kind of unconscious way of the value of art and beauty, and along with goodness, truth, justice, and stuff like that. And I think there's a corollary there between the sciences, having that sense of what is a fundamental unconscious belief that they have as a personal value. I think the simple act of recognizing an aesthetic pleasure, hey, we created this beautiful thing together, can be very intoxicating for a team. So that's my 2 cents.
Hey, I think I'm going to stop my share for a moment and just see if there are reactions from the other panelists here. Anybody want to chime in?
Well, I'll just say that thank you, Patrick. That was so great to see. And design is very similar in that it is often very collaborative, and it is just routine and accepted that you would, give credit to collaborators and, just widely do that. And to get into some of the specifics of the question, the question made me remember, the tenure process when I went up for tenure, and how I actually quantified, I tried as best I could to quantify group projects, like 25% if there were 4 people on this project, not only, to be honest, but also to kind of educate, about this process. I thought it was very important for everyone reviewing this as it went out of Mason Gross and into the university to see like, oh, that's what this particular kind of creative work involves.
Yeah, I think it's really hard, and I'm very conscious that I didn't really answer the second part of the question, which was how do you strike that balance? Because I have a lot of druthers about my own work and about whether or not I was facilitating a team and working on doing that, but not at the same time fulfilling the vision. Like I felt there were many times where I left the shoot where I wasn't happy. Where I wasn't happy with what I had got, but I also knew that I had 25 days to shoot a film and I had to move on. And so it's always this hard balance of being a director when you have 60 people behind you wondering what you're going to do next, and working with them as collaborators. And at the same time, you have a commitment to the art itself, the film you want to make.
It's interesting though, Patrick, because you bring up recognition, which can be really hard when you're caught in your own work.
Yeah.
When you're in process, and really how important it is, that key of recognition, particularly for directors, whether they be in theater or film or working on projects like the collaborative projects like that. And it's interesting to me that the balance that I find that we are not often trained to do is the balance between our own process and the fact that we also are having to watch and recognize the processes of others along the way.
The problem is many times as a director, you think you know exactly what cushion, all the couches, what color they should look like, and so forth. Sometimes the hardest part is just telling yourself to be quiet and allowing those creative collaborators to surprise you with something better.
One of the things we talk about in theater is the secret of casting.
Right.
That once you've cast, then your job is to get out of the way and support their process, as opposed to the worst directors are the ones that are sort of the puppeteers.
No, those are the worst. and there is an old adage in filmmaking is that 90% of being a director is casting. It's making sure you have the right cast.
I was going to speak to that in music as well. Like so much about the success of the team has to do with the makeup of that team. And I mean, it's very different in the university settings about trying to train our students to become really good collaborators. But if I serve on a lot of audition panels for orchestras that I play with, and there's a question of really how do you identify someone who is able to really excel in their instrumental playing and yet know how to kind of give it up for the team. And that is as casting is like, that's almost the most important given for the success of the team.
Right.
That actually is an excellent segue to the next question. How do you balance talent and toxicity when you have a team member who is very valuable because he or she brings needed expertise to the endeavor, but creates a difficult work environment for other team members? And Christopher Cartmill is going to take this one on as a first go.
Yes, difficult people and theater. And I have a slide up that just to dovetail and a nod to Patrick and filmmaking, our sibling in the arts. This is from Howard Hawks' 1934 film, 20th Century. And that it's not only, it was a play in 1932. And that is not me, that is John Barrymore having a directorial conniption fit while another actor has a meltdown in the case of Carol Lombard. We can take that away because as beautiful as it is, I don't think it needs to be our backdrop for the whole time. We've had in the theater, interestingly enough, we have a similar sort of structures. We have so many people in the room creating the work, some of them simultaneously, some of them behind the scenes long before the show. So that sometimes the collaboration is happening in ways that you don't know. For instance, the costume could be designed for a character months, perhaps a year before the role is even cast. And so we have to think about this. But one of the things that I kept thinking about is with regards to this toxicity is for so long in the theater, it was believed to be a part of the process, particularly for talented people, that talented people are difficult and that was an accepted way of approaching the work. So if John Barrymore has a fit or throws a chair, or as once happened to me, a director threw a chair at me, calling me all sorts of names, we begin to, and we all know this, that it takes a great deal of cognitive energy to figure out how to manipulate ourselves or act through those relationships. And that often takes away from the process itself. Some of it in the theater comes about from this mythology of the tortured artist that has a long, long history, as well as the ascendance of the director beginning in the late 18th century and into the 19th century. And the idea that it's one person's vision that creates or coalesces the others. And in many cases, that's necessary, but it's also can bring problems if the person bringing it is quote unquote difficult. And questioning that difficulty becomes really difficult to do as well. And we've been figuring out all along the way, all of the strategies, how to work with them. The actress Tanya Pinkins, I don't know if anybody's aware of Tanya Pinkins' work, but Tanya is an extraordinary actress, but notoriously difficult to work with. One of the things Tanya Pinkins said about the business is she said, quite frankly, in a meeting with a bunch of directors, know your nuisance factor. Know how much of a pain you're going to be to work with so that you can figure out if you're talented enough. That mix is so strange, but we all have to deal with it at a certain point, as well as we have to understand, at least in our work, that it is emotionally driven. And often the ego gets caught in it because there's one adage for casting is there are no small roles. There are only small actors. And the need for people to put their ego aside becomes very, very difficult. One of the things in the theater that we have as a mechanism for that that's developed beginning in the 20th century with the rise of the auteur directors, with the rise of these Barrymore-like figures, or at least Barrymore in that show, Oscar, I forget his name, but is stage management, who really functions to be the logistic managers of the shows, to keep the logistics moving forward, to keep the components and the collaborators all working on a line. But we forget that there also needs to be artistic support. I mean, this is something that Patrick talked about with regards acknowledging the aesthetic achievement. So who is actually looking after the aesthetics? And that became actually beginning also in the 18th century and into the present, the dramaturg that's there to support those aspects. So there are mechanisms to do it, but I will tell you the theater is still dealing with this question about the connection between talent and being difficult or toxic. The other thing that's hard and we could not unpack here is the fact that in the arts, many times mental illness and talent have been equated with one another and the difficulty that that sometimes creates in a room. I solved nothing, but I said something.
Christopher, thank you so much. Let me ask Alessandra, since she did not get to speak in the last round, if she would like to open up the responses here.
Yeah, thank you. You know, I think I just want to add that in the dance field, oftentimes when we're dealing with toxicity, it's because we're having to work when we're completely, entirely exhausted. We're having to embody and physicalize virtuosic movement when we have the flu, when we've had no sleep. We're still having to do that work at an incredibly high level when our bodies actually are injured. And so part of what becomes critical in dealing with that toxic energy is acknowledging that people are exhausted, acknowledging that people are sick, acknowledging that people are injured, and having to still show up and work at 120%, embody at 150% past those incredibly difficult and impossible physical issues. And I think second, I just want to add that what's been helpful to me in dealing with toxicity is having really great leadership and being able to rely on strong leadership. When the toxicity is happening at that high level, it doesn't work. And so it's been important for me to work with collaborators who embody healing, who take care of their mental health, who are well and are working on that on an ongoing basis.
Beautiful.
Thank you for that, Alessandra. You make me also think of that adage, the show must go on, and how we've trained ourselves, that even that song says that horrible things are happening to you, but you chin up and you move on. And trying to understand that that's what we're bringing to it is so important. Thank you.
And others who would like to weigh in on talent and toxicity?
I would just add that in working on films with toxic actors, only because Chris brought it up, or talent, my strategy has always been, I understand this might be a part of your process to get where you need to be with this character, but your character does not exist in a foxhole in the sense that you are part of everything else that is going on here. You are in a scene with other people. So you are just as responsible for them as I am responsible for them. And really reminding of everybody about the collective endeavor it's hard because I understand, you know, actors have a process of how they get to a certain place, and you really have to honor that because not everybody can act. It is a very unique job, and so I think this idea of making sure that they are allowed a certain amount of room, but they have to understand it as a collective.
And what you're saying that's interesting is the idea that you may have your process, but you don't have to make that everybody else's process.
Exactly, yeah.
We have one more minute on this subject. If Jonathan, Jacky would like to weigh in.
Go ahead, Jacky.
Jacky, you're up.
Oh, okay. Well, I really appreciate what Alessandra said about leadership and coming from a place of healing. And to be honest, when I read the question, my first reaction was toxicity is not something to be balanced. You know, it needs to be addressed for the individual's own good and everyone's survival. So, you know, it's something to be addressed, not balanced, and it can be addressed and conversations can happen, and, you know, it's not something to, gloss over. We can talk about it until we figure it out.
Great. Thank you so much. I'm gonna go ahead to the next question, if that's okay. Let's see. Slideshow. All right. So question 3, Alessandra is going to start us off on this one. How do you maintain team integrity as individuals enter and leave the team? How do you maintain team productivity during such transitions?
Yes, yes. So I'd like to, if you can show the image, perfect, to talk about this in relationship with my collaboration with my colleagues. So on the left of this image is Dr. Hui Wilcox, who's a professor at St. Catherine University in St. Paul, and Dr. Ananya Chatterjee, who's a professor of dance at the University of Minnesota. And then that's me. And so these are my colleagues, and we work together to put this book together, Dancing Transnational Feminisms. And I want to talk a little bit about this because we started this project 10 years ago in 2012. And it took 10 years. This book was just published a month ago. It took 10 years to put this together because we had absolutely no resources. And all of us were working full time. At the time, I was a graduate student at UCLA. And so I think when I think about this project and I think about how we began with, this is an anthology. So we began working with scholars at the beginning who, over the course of the 10 years, they left the project, right? They had to. It's a 10-year-long project. People needed to move on to other things. And so we lost people. But at times, Ananya or Hui, they would contact me and try to pick the project up when we had gone silent on the project. At times, I tried to contact them when we had gone silent on the project and they didn't, respond back to me. And so it was an incredibly difficult, challenging road. We danced together. So on the right in that image, Ananya is on the left. I'm next to her, and Hui is bent over. Her face is obscured. We dance together. So we sweat together. We rehearse for 4 hours, and immediately we go into the other room and we work on the book. I remember us working together on July 4th, one of the most popular holidays of the year, trying to revise our manuscript and resubmit it for another round of blind reviews, working together on holidays. It's been a grueling process. But what kept us moving forward, even though we lost people along the way, is because we really believed in this project. And I think that if we can bring in that urgency into what enables us to move our work forward, even when we lose people, that is critical. That even as year and year and year go by, it is the urgency of the project. It's the urgency of the artist stories who are here. It's the urgency of bringing scholars of dance in communication with scholars of American studies, scholars of gender studies, scholars of anthropology. It's having those scholarly essays alongside poetry from dancers, alongside interviews from dancers, that we needed to have this interdisciplinary work in the field of dance. We needed to be able to talk about how dance embodies a gendered politics. And so I think that is really the most important thing that I want to get across. How can we embody a kind of urgency about our work that keeps us moving our work forward?
Beautiful. Alessandra, congratulations on the book. Fabulous achievement. Great. So Jonathan, since you did not have the chance to weigh in on the last one, would you like to chime in here?
Sure. And this will also, in some way segue to the next question, that in terms of team integrity has so much to do with the institutional culture. I'll be talking about one specific organization I play with, and the idea that people who associate themselves with an organization understand like what the kind of underlying ethics of that of what the process is going to be artistically. So I'll be talking about the Orpheus Chamber Orchestra, and it's that sort of understanding that the collaboration is the most important aspect of what we're doing, and that everybody in the room is kind of only is really invited to participate in that process if they come in with that understanding. That's what enables, in the case of Orpheus, of the group to have kind of one evolving but one kind of underlying sense of style over 50 years. It is really because of the kind of understanding of the group culture.
Jacky, Christopher, or Patrick? Jacky, you look ready to say something. Are you there?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I could just say that, you know, since we're all talking about creative teamwork or teamwork in the creative arts, the team is just naturally well suited to transition. I mean, if you have an articulated kind of goal and mission and values, I mean, it's not, I don't mean to say it's super easy, but, you know, if those things are articulated, that really helps with people coming and going. And a team is, these kinds of creative productions that are team-based are better suited to transitions than not having a team.
I think if I could just interject, I'm going to just draw together the themes that some of the themes that Patrick was talking about, especially about like really recognizing the beauty in what we do. And I think that this translates very well to the sciences, although I'm not a scientist, right? The beauty that you perceive in the world and the beauty of the work that you're engaged in as far as helping people, and the urgency that Alessandra was talking about, the ethics of an organization and what drives us, right? That kind of intersection of beauty, ethics, and the kind of overarching mission, as Jacky was saying, right? Those kinds of things really help a team thrive. Christopher, go ahead, please.
Well, I was thinking, I was really moved by Alessandra's point too, that I think is so important, which is the objective. That when all eyes are on that, how the team is working, is the ego gets subsumed in the objective. And that's something in the best working situations I've been, where clearly we have a goal in mind that has nothing to do with my individual ego or achievement.
Wonderful. Patrick, did you want to add anything here?
No, I just wanted to say that I was curious about if Alessandra had any doubts at any time and how collectively they figured that out. You know, I imagine an endeavor that was so many years took a lot of rebounding and renewing. And I was curious about that effort on your part.
Yeah, lots of rebounding. Lots of rebounding. You know, I don't think I had doubts that we were going to finish.
Right.
I think what was unclear to me was how long is this going to take? How long is this going to take? I think that one thing that kept me motivated is how much we work through our disagreements. And I think that when I think about how often we disagreed, you know, we would meet at the University of Minnesota in a classroom and we'd be arguing over sentences. We'd be arguing over, well, no, that's not a queer practice. Yes, it is. No, it's not. Yes, it is. No, it's not. And we always work through those disagreements. I think that disagreement became such a crux of how we worked that actually gave me hope. We're always able to work through, get past. Sometimes we just leave the disagreements like, you know what, we're not gonna agree on that. And so we've got to try and structure some sentences that honor that disagreement. That was helpful for me.
That's fascinating. And also, let me just highlight that to say that it's really hard to live in the world we're living in right now and be comfortable with that disagreement or be comfortable with uncertainty, knowing that, you know, there might be multiple ways of looking at something. And I really respect that, Alessandra. That's a really important thing to highlight here. If it's okay, I'm going to move along to the next question, which I think is going to be for Jonathan to take the lead. So question 4, do you have specific processes for communication and conflict resolution when problems arise that can affect everyone on a team? What works and what doesn't work?
Wow. So so that's a picture of the Orpheus Chamber Orchestra at Carnegie Hall a couple years ago. I'm actually not in that picture, but those are my friends and colleagues. So Orpheus, I've been a member of that group for 25 years. The group has been in existence for 50 years. And what you'll notice about the picture is that it's an orchestra, probably 35 players. There's no conductor. And that's sort of what's been I talk about the culture of an organization. That was the underlying mission of Orpheus when it was founded, was to be able to interpret music collaboratively, that everybody on that stage has a say in what the orchestra ends up doing. And so that process, which traditionally there's a conductor who frequently a toxic individual, but who is, basically gets their say, and our work with the conductor is to realize their vision. And so with Orpheus, we have developed over all of those 50 years, exactly processes. I think that interpreting a musical score is very much like a research project. You're given the conductor, or the composer on the page gives you, certain amount of information of what they envision. And the musician's task is to take those givens about that the composer gives you, typically the notes that you're going to play, though not always, how loud, general descriptive of how fast and what that character is. And then the research of the interpreter is to take those clues and then to decide on, in an artistic way, in a personal, expressive way, what that's going to mean in terms of a sound presentation for the audience. Orpheus has, I talked about culture, like developed this culture of teamwork where everybody in the group, sort of vetted as being a strong individual player, strong instrumentalist, but it's really our ability to be able to discuss the music collaboratively, opinionatedly, and then to craft interpretation out of that. So in terms of the specific processes, we do have a few ground rules. One of them is, and this happens a lot in rehearsal, that someone will suggest something, we want to try it a different way, a faster tempo or a softer dynamic. And there'll be someone else in the group who's thinking about this, and they disagree. The person suggests, someone else disagrees, and sometimes vehemently. And there'll usually be a third party in the group will say, no, we're going to try it. And that assumption that whatever is suggested is going to be tried goes such a long way as a process. So we're not discussing someone's idea in kind of a theoretical way. We're really, we put it to the test in rehearsal, see if it works. And then we discuss, and very often it's very surprising. Sometimes the person who suggested it doesn't like their own idea, but someone else says, no, I really think that's where the truth lies musically. So it's really the essential success of Orpheus is that we really go into rehearsals understanding that we're going to have to listen to each other, and that goes a long way towards solving some of the other problems that are on the table with the 5 questions. Nancy's asking do we ever have to fire anybody? It's been so the interesting thing with Orpheus is that the hiring process is very, very, sorry, I'm trying to, so I guess, Rebecca, if you want to drop the slide, it's, can show my face. The hiring process is very complex and convoluted. We have a sub pool. For instance, I've been taking this year off from playing with Orpheus, so they're hiring other cellists who might be prospective members of the group. If I end up retiring from the group, then my slot would be chosen from those people who are active in the substitutes. I was a sub for 10 years, so it's a kind of apprenticeship, and so that when someone's actually voted in as a member of the group, they're so thoroughly vetted. So there have been issues with personnel, and they get addressed, usually successfully. But that's but there are ongoing tensions as the group is 50 years old. It's a very kind of athletic. Our work is very athletic, and we need people have to be very honest with themselves in terms of how they feel about the kind of the touring life and the athleticism that they have to bring to performances.
Fabulous. Thank you so much. Bijou, I do see your question. Well, why don't we leave that for the end? But for now, I'm going to go. Oh, no, we need to ask other people if they have responses. Sorry, I forgot what I was doing. Anybody have a response to this question or to Jonathan's comments? Christopher.
Well, I was hearing this motif among all of us about leadership. And one of the things that we're talking in dramaturgical circles is it possible to create a theater that's built not hierarchically, but in a network model? And how do we imagine such a thing? Because this is so part of our tradition, the structures that we have. And what's interesting is trying to break those structures is fascinating right now.
Patrick?
Yeah, I'm just blown away by a group being together for 50 years and to think about an artistic endeavor that continues to evolve. And I'm curious if you see the individual pieces as standalones, or if you see the accumulation of 50 years as the body of work that is building into one.
That's such a great question. There's certain pieces we play that we keep coming back to, where we really feel like we're resting on the work we've done. And we might play like the Tchaikovsky String Serenade on one rehearsal. Like we never do something on one rehearsal. And we just basically read through it and we get on stage and play it because we know it. But we challenge ourselves. We learn a lot of new repertoire. We're really trying to expand the repertoire. And so then it's like reinventing. And we have processes for reinventing, but we don't want to just keep playing Tchaikovsky String Serenade.
Right. Fascinating.
Great. Jacky or Alessandra?
I just wanted to say I was amazed by the 10 years of apprenticing. That is so much dedication and listening and observing and memorizing and digesting and serious commitment. That's really amazing, extraordinary to hear.
Jacky, any thoughts?
It relates a lot to what I was going to talk about next. So that's
so we can move on to that if you'd like.
Very interesting to me.
Okay, why don't I go ahead and share my screen again? So Jacky is going to lead the answer to this question. What do you see as the greatest challenges in leading a team?
Hi, so I'm Jacky Thaw. I am a professor of design in the Department of Art and Design, and I'm the director of our new MFA program, which is all about collaborating with other disciplines. I'm not the head of design because we don't have that. So I just want
in my heart, you're the head of design. Sorry, I didn't know.
Thank you. Well, we're very non-hierarchical in art and design. So I hope to shed a little light on the idea of leading by talking about art and design methods and my own team experience. So this is a photograph by Richard Barnes of a starling murmuration, a huge group of birds that swoop and swirl across the sky together like a shape-shifting cloud. The starling murmurations can react to their environment as a group without a central leader. and any part of the flock can transform the movement of the whole. So this is a great model of how teams and collective leadership can work, with everyone doing their part and also responding to each other and being adaptable to the situation. Adrienne Maree Brown, in her book, Emergent Strategy, Shaping Change, Changing Worlds, talks about starlings and ants and ferns and mycelium and other structures in science and nature that are highly productive and non-hierarchical. These models from the natural world are useful in thinking about how humans can work together toward collective goals. Joe Ryland wrote an article that you might know about called Preparing for Leaderful Practice. He describes leaderful practice as, quote, the practice of involving everyone in leadership, that leadership can be a collective property. And he goes on to describe the 4 facets of leaderful practice as collective, concurrent, collaborative, and compassionate. He says, leaderful team designs are thought to produce effective outcomes because they engage everyone in mutual action. Everyone's talent is allowed to shine through and contribute to team goals. People can bring their whole selves to work and feel at home contributing to the greater good. So this idea of leaderful practice has become an important model in the worlds of management and education. And I like to think of it as leading by empowering. And it's very related to what Jonathan was just talking about. And it may sound quite idealistic, but I have a couple of examples that I wanted to go into. So one of the greatest challenges in leading by empowering might be communication and engendering productive conversations in a team. So we could learn something about this from a method that is fundamental to art and design, the critique. Critique isn't about being critical in a negative way. Instead, it means people presenting their rough or in-process work to peers and mentors for honest and constructive feedback. So that sounds great and easy, but it is actually a lot of work to create an environment where people feel comfortable to do that and where, it is productive. And that is, a lot of what we do in art and design. Most creative fields have something like this, a kind of workshop thing, such as a playwright having a table read of a script and development. So critique is really the norm in art and design education, and also professionally. In a professional design studio, we have pinups. Team members literally pin up work on a wall, or they might show it on screen, and the whole team discusses constructively the pros and cons of various approaches. And it's very important to frame these conversations not as a judgment, but as a way to contemplate work and evolve it together. And the leader's role in this context is to facilitate the entire team's sharing ideas in a way that is deeply inclusive and constructive, that is thoughtful, and where are they? So the leader is a very important aspect of this, but in a way needs to be transparent or not controlling the conversation. Be a facilitator to let the conversation flow. Artist Carolyn Willard has developed and shared some very well thought out tactics for creating a healthy and generative environment for creative project critiques. And much of it concerns developing and articulating awareness about one's communication style, one's role in the conversation, and the project's goals to really deeply inform team conversations. And she uses things like questionnaires and surveys and diagrams and exercises and group agreements, among other methods. So, what can science learn from this? There's both a mindset and a methodology involved for an intentional group conversation. And it's a kind of team conversation that fuels creative development in art and design, and it could maybe be adapted to science as well. I also thought to maybe shed some light on leading by empowering, this idea of creating an environment where everyone's best efforts can come through by describing a situation without a single leader, similar to what Jonathan was talking about. As a designer, I often work with people in other fields, science, education, business, and the arts. I also maintain a long-time collaboration with a team of graphic designers. We're currently 4, and at times there have been as many as 8 in this group. We establish our group specifically to create each project together, and we credit our work to a collective name. From the beginning, we committed to a leaderless democratic structure. We are all the team and all the leader. We have found a lot of value in this, and our projects have won awards for being innovative in their own right, and also for bringing up ideas about new design methodologies. So how do we do this? You know, at the beginning, it was very messy and time consuming, but we found that the egalitarian structure tended to make everyone feel very responsible, very committed, and very empowered to do their best work. So despite it being messy and time consuming, we said we have to keep going with this. And over time, we have really developed so much trust and understanding from working together that there's a lot of shorthand and there's a lot of efficiency, and we know each other so well that we can collaborate with a lot of trust, and it goes faster and it's not so messy, but it's still pretty messy. Our process is done linear. At the start of our project, we talk and share knowledge. We will work separately and then take time to share and discuss our divergent results, the critique, shaking out the various tendrils to get to the common or the most important points. It's a creative process that fluctuates between organized and organic. And after a few or many cycles of this, the project coalesces into a coherent whole. Then we divide up for production and execution, and team members naturally volunteer for what suits their skill sets and availability. It can feel like we're on a circuitous route at times, yet teamwork in this organic, democratic way invariably leads to great ideas and the ability to execute them well. Over time, you know, it's gotten very shorthand, as I mentioned. Is this the perfect model for all teamwork? No, but I think that the lesson here might be that all team members can lead in some way. And so, you know, a challenge for a leader is to find everyone's leadership potential, and a rich work process allows for everyone to contribute something that feels equally important. And in any field, as a leader, your job is to articulate the mindset and establish the systems that allow team members to feel and operate like partners with you and with each other.
All right, thank you so much, Jacky. I know that Christopher needs to leave for class, so we'll thank him now. And maybe we'll just take 1 or 2 minutes to see if there's a response to Jacky from the other panelists, and then finish with Biju's question. So does anybody want to offer a quick response to what Jacky was sharing?
Yeah, I'll just add that, you know, thinking about, well, the difference between, you know, the collective critique is really interesting and fascinating to me, and very different, I guess, from my arena of, like, if, you know, there are rules that no one can give direction to an actor, not even another actor, without talking to the director, you know? And so this idea of collective critique is fascinating to me, and at the same time is fundamental to filmmaking curriculum. You know, it is, you know, that critique and feedback is, as I tell my students, I've gotten a number of jobs from coming out of a screening, talking to a producer, what do you think of that film? And I give my take, and then suddenly they hire me the next day for a job. So that idea of building that, and I make sure that all my students are talking and giving critique to each other, because I think, you know, for all the reasons that you outlined are really positive, and that building of that critical thinking is incredibly important. I'm curious, Jacky, what happens when there is disagreement within the critiques? You know, like, how do you circumvent that? Like, how do you forge ahead with, you know, the ideal that you have that might be different from an individual's?
Well, I mean, with this creative work that I do, our group is called Class Action Collective, and you know, we're all coming at it as equals, so there's not someone to step in. So we have to keep working it out until we can come to, you know, a solution that doesn't feel like a creative compromise. Because I mean, we have certain established and articulated methods and values, and you know, one of them is not to find the consensus, because that's not always going to be the best thing. Right. So we keep hashing it out until, you know, someone's either too exhausted to defend their position any longer, or you know, or we sort of convince each other, you know, of the best path forward.
Wow.
So I think we need to wrap up. Biju, do we have time for the last question, or would you prefer that we close here?
No, why don't we just give it one go round? And,
okay.
Thank you.
Great. So the question was, given how critical it is to picking people is so critical to establishing and maintaining a good team culture, is there one interview question you ask to determine if a candidate would be a good fit for your group? So I don't know, does anybody want to start? Patrick?
Sure. I have specific thoughts about this. My questions are always with a collaborator. What did you think of the screenplay? And in their particular arena, I'm very fascinated by the answer, not that it fulfills what I was already thinking, but rather that it is an interesting idea, and then I follow up. If they are just going to replicate what I already thought, that isn't adding to the process, if that makes sense. I need somebody who has an interesting way of thinking, and even if it isn't exactly, if I can dig in and find something fascinating about the way they're creative or thinking, that gets me excited about working with the potential collaborators.
Great. Alessandra, do you want to share one interview question?
Yeah, I think in dance, it would have to be, what is your regular training practice outside of rehearsal? Coming to rehearsal is not going to be enough to sustain you in the work. You need to be going to yoga 6 times a week. You need to be doing personal Pilates training. You need to be getting on the treadmill at least a few times a week. And so what are you doing for yourself to maintain yourself physically, mentally, emotionally, outside of our time working together, so that when you come to work, you can actually do the work?
Great. Jacky, do you want to share one interview question?
I think, you know, a lot of open-ended questions that engender discussion, kind of similar to what Patrick's saying. And also I might ask someone, if you didn't do this job, what would be your, you know, like, who do you most want to work with? What organizations, or what's your dream job?
Okay, Jonathan?
So with music, it's all about playing. And so, you know, I would want to play with somebody, and what I'm looking for is that, are you able to play your instrument and listen to what other people are doing? And it's that combined ability to play and listen simultaneously that marks someone as a good collaborator.
Maybe I'll just add that I mentor a lot of students who are on the job market, right? And so everybody knows, when you go for a job interview, especially for an academic job, you need to be able to say, you need to have a question to their question. Do you have any questions for us? And I always tell them that one of the best questions I've ever heard, and I give it to all my students who are on the job market, is what do you look for in a collaborator, or what do you look for in a colleague? So being open, I think, to that kind of, that feedback about what it would take to be on the team is another, that's like from the candidate's angle, that's another useful tip. And with that, I think we'll end, if that's okay.
Fantastic. Thank you all so much for joining.